Hey everybody, Tex-Mex here. Thanks for joining me for another video. Today we're going to take a look at the Beretta Cx4 Storm, a very sci-fi looking 9mm carbine. Now these first came out in 2003, so they're about to hit 20 years old. And back then, because this one is close to 20 years old, I think I got this one not too long after they started producing them. They made them where they could either accept 92, Beretta 92 style mags or PX4 mags. And back then the PX4 hadn't been around that long. 92 mags were everywhere because of the military. You could find used magazines all over the place. So I opted for the 92. Since then I've purchased some PX4s. So really at this point I really wouldn't care which one they have because I have plenty of magazines of either. Although that's being said, I think it's still easier to find these large, high capacity magazines for the 92 version versus the PX4 version. So it's a simple blowback operated rifle. It's just under 6 pounds, like 5.75 pounds. Back when they first created them, they made them in 9mm 40 Smith & Wesson and 45 ACP, and they still make the 9 and the 40. The 45 I think has since been discontinued. It has a 16-inch barrel in here with a 6-groove right-hand twist. The upper and lower to this are all polymer. However, it does have a hammer forged and chrome lined barrel. Most of the controls are reversible. The one thing that isn't reversible here is the bolt release lever. But for left-hand shooters, pretty much everything else is reversible, and even the ejection. So it can start ejecting in the other direction to make shooting more comfortable for you. Now it has a thumb hole stock here that most people aren't crazy about, although this one really isn't uncomfortable because it's very much like a pistol. I mean, the controls here are very pistol-like, and that has a lot of benefits to it. It does have a manual safety, but besides that, it also has a firing pin block and a hammer block, so it's very safe. And it has a spot here where you could put spacers in, so you can adjust the length if you need it a little bit longer. It's very light and comfortable. The biggest complaint most people have is the trigger. It's a long, heavy trigger, and from my recollection, because I have torn this apart and cleaned it a few times, the trigger is plastic, and I think even where the sear meets, it's all plastic. So it gives it kind of a long, creepy trigger. That being said, it's not as terrible as many people claim it is, at least in my opinion. I don't expect this to shoot like a $1,000 hunting rifle that needs to have a crisp, clean trigger. But just to see how bad the trigger is, I did bring my Wheeler trigger gauge, so we're going to try that in a second and see what the trigger weighs at. The sights are a peep sight with a post front sight. You've got the little ears here to protect them. The peep sight has a short and long range peep that you can switch. And I, as you can see, have this very cheapy Chinese tack point blue ring red dot on here. Those were very popular back in the day for people that didn't want to afford an aim point, but could buy the Chinese knockoff. Now, obviously, I wouldn't use something like this for actual self-defense firearm, but for a fun plinker, I thought it was great. That's one of the things that's very cool about the Beretta PX4 is that it does allow for co-witnessing. So when, and I'll try to show that here once I'm firing it. I can see my sights through the red dot, so if for some reason the battery dies on the red dot, I can still use the iron sights to keep shooting. Now, as far as disassembly, it's very simple to disassemble. You basically have one pin there. It's a disassembly latch, and then it all pretty much comes apart. So it's a very easy gun to maintain. And rails, it's got rails. I mean, you've got this tall rail on the top for putting optics, got a rail here on the side. You can mount another rail here on the other side. In case you thought to yourself, I wish I could have one more rail. Well, look at this. One more rail. This thing is just chock full of rails. That's very cool. A little mechanism here where you push in the shoulder sling stud and you can push that rail right back in. I actually used to have an old red dot, not old red dot, an old laser mounted on that, but since then I've kind of moved away from lasers on my carbines in favor of just a red dot sight. So we are going to fire some old 9mm ammo out of it. You see this Winchester box here of Winchester White Box 9mm 115 grain. You can figure out how old it is because if you see here, this was originally $9.99, then was on sale for $7.99, then eventually had a sticker for $4.89. So you can only imagine how old of a box of ammunition this is. And when you're asking, hey, Tex-Mex, you seem to shoot a lot, why do you have such old ammo? Well, as it happens, I have a lot of extended friends and family that'll now and then come into firearms. Or, for example, the way I got this one was a friend of my wife's, very close friend. She had an uncle that passed intestate, which means he didn't have a will, nor does he have any heirs. So suddenly her mother or his sister, my wife's friend's mom, making this very complicated, maybe I can put up a Venn diagram, asked us to go in because he did own some firearms, and I went through, made sure they were all unloaded, cleaned them up for them, put them in touch with an FFL where they could transfer them to other individuals if they did want to sell them. But they told me to keep all the ammo and get rid of all the ammo, and this was one of the boxes of ammo that they had. Now, fun story, that uncle, I mean, he seemed to be a firearms guy. He didn't have a ton of them, but one thing he did have was he had a Beretta 96. As you know, that's the 40 Smith & Wesson version of the 92, but he had 9mm loaded in the magazine. So I'm not sure that he ever fired that. I hope he never fired it. He may have been one of those collectors that never really shot his firearms much. He didn't have a ton of them, and most of them seemed to be firearms that were from the 50s through the 70s. He had a couple of modern that it looks like he just never fired out of the box. But anyway, so we're gonna shoot this whole 9mm. I'm sure it's gonna shoot fine. Let's start out by testing the trigger on this guy, and then I'm here at 20 yards. I've got a target set out down there, so we'll take some shots with this at 20 yards and see how well it groups, and then after that we'll just have some fun shooting some of the steel I have. So let me get the wheeler out and we can test this trigger. Okay, we got our trigger gauge ready here. This does not have a magazine safety, so rack the slide. Let's see, 6 pounds, 4.2 ounces. That's not bad. So let's clear that and try it again. We'll do 3 times. 5 pounds, 6.6 ounces. Not bad at all. Now I'm wondering, I have put a lot of rounds through this, so maybe just through use, possibly the plastic sear has started to smooth out a little bit. Let's try one more. 5.12 ounces. Yeah, wow. One more time. This seems to be pretty good. 4 pounds, 12 ounces. Yeah, see, this trigger is not bad. It's not terribly consistent. We got readings there between 14 and 16, excuse me, 14, 4 and 6 pounds. But really, that's a fine trigger. I do recall out of the box, it was heavier than that. I want to say it was probably closer to 8 pounds. But that goes to show that it may smooth out over time. You just have to make sure you have fun and put a lot of rounds through it. So let me go ahead and double check my batteries on the tack point here, and let's go ahead and shoot some steel. Well, nope, take that back. Let's shoot the target first and see how well it groups at 20 yards. Okay, let me see if I can show the co-witnessing. So there's the rear peep sight, and there's the red dot. I don't know if you can see the red dot active down there right now, but you can co-witness between the sights and look right through your optic. So that's sort of I mean, if you do want to have this sort of a rifle for self-defense, and for somebody who wants a light handy rifle and a soft shooting caliber, something like this would be great. But let's see how well it groups down there at 20 yards. Okay, 20 yards. Let's load our first round in here. Put my big cowboy hat to the side because my ear protection doesn't fit over it. And I'm going to aim using the red dot because that's what I think I have it sighted in for. Woo! The cartridge bounced back and burnt me a little bit. Okay. Oof. Is it shaking the camera? It's shaking my hat. It looks like you're still looking in the right direction. And that's 10. Let's go take a look. Well, as you see here, it's shot very well. Now, even with the low trigger pull that I was getting with my trigger gauge, I can tell you when I was trying to fire this thing just using the tip of my finger, it was a heavy trigger. It feels much heavier. So this is the type of rifle that you're going to be pulling it sort of like a double action revolver. But once again, for a pistol carbine, I think that's completely acceptable. I think this accuracy is very, very acceptable. And now we're gonna start shooting at some of these little guys down here and having some fun. I was able to load 20 rounds into this magazine. I'm not sure how many it fits. I didn't try to fit more than 20. I think it may be a 25 or 30 round magazine. But for now, we're gonna do 20 rounds of 20-year-old 9mm at 20 yards. So let's see how well we can do. I'm gonna start from left to right and try to hit every target at least once. Oh, there we go. Oh, there we go. Knock it down. Oh, that's a lot of fun. So, like I said, the Beretta Cx4, great gun, very light, handy, easy to shoot, perfect for people who don't like a lot of recoil. The 9mm, I'm sure even 40 is probably a lot of fun. Only downside is the trigger, but it's not terrible. Certainly fine for, as you can see, I'm hitting small plates there at 20 yards, grouping well at 20 yards. Certainly something you should consider if you're on the market for a nice 9mm carbine. So once again, thank you all for joining me. This was a lot of fun. I really love shooting 9mm carbines. I've actually got one more in my collection. I'm going to try to do a video with that one at some point here soon. But until then, take good care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video.